Welcome to the Inclusive Leadership Equation. How is everyone doing? You know what frustrates me about humans? We lie to ourselves. We lie to ourselves all the time, right? We tell ourselves that we're doing great when we're actually not. We act absolutely perfect in front of others. And that's why I like to always share my imperfections, right? Because inclusive leaders actually take ownership. So here it goes. I'm going to tell them myself. I was motivating them with money and bonuses, but I didn't ask about challenging team or client or even cultural dynamics that they were facing. I never even asked consistently how best to support them. I didn't ask them how I could actually improve as a leader, right? Because I didn't work to shift the system that I had in place because, you know what? That's what I was taught, and it actually worked for me. And so here's the thing about this. When you don't know your people's why, you don't get to keep your people. Now, Beyonce has a famous line in one of her songs. I woke up like this, right? But I didn't wake up as an inclusive leader. I had to experience failure that actually stripped away my ego and forced me to rebuild the way that I actually lead. And so that's why I can stand here in front of all of you with credibility, right? Because I wasn't perfect. And guess what, folks? Neither are you. Now that I've vented a little bit, let me reintroduce myself. I'm Netta Jenkins. My background's in behavioral psychology and communications. I am actually obsessed with human behavior. What makes us tick? What makes us thrive? And what makes us quit? I'm a 2-time author, and my most recent book is Supercharged Teams. I've worked with organizations of every size in every industry, leading transformational management training on a global scale. But here's the thing, I didn't truly experience the full power of inclusive leadership until 2023. Can you believe that? I'm telling on myself today. At the time, I was VP of Inclusive Strategy at a tech firm, and I went beyond the scope of my role. I built a team, right? I developed a tech platform that could measure employee behavior to business impact. And here's what happened, folks. That platform's data actually helped to secure an $8 million deal. I see some of your eyes lighting up. Now, shortly after, my former CEO named me CEO of that very platform that I had created. Now, that was the flashy part. But here's the defining moment. It was when I left to build that new company, and my entire team actually followed me. They chose to be paid less. They chose the uncertainty of a tech startup. They chose to build something from scratch, all because they actually trusted me. And so that's the real power of inclusive leadership, that people actually follow and trust you even in the unknown. And that's your first takeaway today. Now, I want to be honest with you about where I actually failed in the inclusive leadership process. After that gut-wrenching experience in 2010, I began to become obsessed with people. I wanted to understand from every single one of my team members what motivated them, what drained them, and what dynamics they were experiencing with each other, and even across functions. I asked for feedback constantly. I checked myself on how I was falling short as a leader. I mean, I studied behavior like a scientist. And guess what? It worked. People actually trusted me. My teams grew stronger. But, folks, here's where I failed again. I didn't tackle the system. And that's the scary part, right? Because you can do everything right with individuals and still lose them if the system that they are working in is actually broken. So that's your second takeaway today. Inclusive leadership has two layers. There's people and there's systems. Now, most of us focus on shifting people's behavior, right? But few of us, very few of us, are actually willing to confront the system. Because here's the thing, systems feel impossible to change. They're old, and they are built long before we even got there. They are the performance review processes that actually favor the loudest voice in the room. That's actually liked by leaders. They're the bonus structures that report output, but they ignore collaboration. They're the promotion ladders that value tenure or powerful connections before talent. And let me give you an example of this. I once worked with a brilliant, and I mean brilliant engineer, sharp, innovative, the go-to problem solver for some of the toughest challenges. But every performance review, she was actually rated average. Now, what happened was the system only measured deliverables completed, not the complexity of the actual problems that she was solving, or even the mentorship that she provided to junior engineers. So here's what happened. She left the company within a year. I want to talk to you about another example. The company that I partner with had a system where it celebrated customer acquisition above all else, right? Their sales team was showered with bonuses, while the customer success team, who actually kept those customers, were invisible. Invisible. What happened? Well, guess what? They had a record-breaking sales one quarter, but by the next quarter, churn actually wiped out all of that revenue. See, what happened again was the system undermined the very business outcome that they claimed to value. And that's the danger of systems, right? Because you could be the kindest, you could be the most attentive leader in the world, but if you don't address those legacy processes, you know, the ones that actually quietly disadvantage your people, you're not a truly inclusive leader. So let's begin building this equation together, shall we? There's people plus systems plus blank equals inclusive leadership. All right? Now, we know that people give you trust. We know that systems give you sustainability, and that's long-term growth. But let's start to dive into how we tackle the system. And there's 3 strategies that you can actually put into action right now. And I know you all have some cards. 1, audit 1 system per quarter. What you want to do is ask, who does this system advantage and who does it disadvantage? Don't try to overhaul everything at once. That won't work. Just start small. Now, the next you want to co-create with your people, right? Bring employees into redesigning the very systems that actually shape their work. Here's an example of that. One company that I worked with invited frontline staff to co-design their performance review form. Here's the result. They was able to put a process in place that employees believed in, and leadership got more accurate data. Now, lastly, what you want to do is you want to tie systems back to business outcomes. See, executives listen when systems are actually linked to impact. So for example, when I built that platform that actually measured employee behavior and tied it to customer acquisition trends, it actually helped to secure that $8 million deal, right? So that got leadership attention right away. So The real work of inclusive leadership is build deep trust with your people, confront the systems that actually silently, and that's a key word, silently, undermine them, and then redesign those systems to align with both human needs and even business impact. Now, let's move forward into the equation, right? Because trust and sustainability on its own won't get you through the inclusive leadership process. So that's where the other two actually come into play. There's agility and solution-oriented thinking. So agility actually gives you the ability to pivot, right, when conditions actually change. And some examples could be a new policy, a shifting market, an unexpected resignation. See, leaders who are rigid, they break. Leaders who are agile bend, and they're able to bounce right back. Now, next is solution-oriented thinking. That's the engine that actually drives progress. It's what I like to call the refusal to stay stuck in the problem, frankly. It's training your brain, and even your team's brain, to really think about, well, why this won't work, and shifting that mindset to how can we actually make that work. Now, when you put it all together, you get what I call the PASS formula. And that's the full inclusive leadership equation. And if you're missing even one part, your leadership will actually stall. Now, let's dive into a meaty scenario where this can get messy, but leaders can actually make the difference. So here's a scenario. A fast-growing Lisbon tech company is scaling quickly. Suddenly, 30% of new hires are all immigrants. Immigrants, let's say from Brazil, from South Asia, and Africa. Now, first, leadership is celebrating, right? Look at all our talent. We're so excited. But within months, folks, onboarding is all in Portuguese. And what that does, it leaves new hires confused and even disengaged. Managers misread silence as weakness when it's actually a language gap. And then local staff dominate meetings, and newcomers, well, let's just say they end up checking out. Performance reviews unintentionally penalize non-native speakers. And talent? Well, talent starts walking out the door. Or they stay, and they are the most unproductive people in the company. See, an inclusive leader can step in and apply the PASS formula, right, on the ground. So we're going to break this down further. Again, P stands for people, and that equals trust. Now, this means an inclusive leader would run listening sessions with their own teams and ask two critical questions. What's getting in the way of you doing your best work? And what support do you actually need from me this week? See, by asking these two questions, within the scenario that I've positioned to you all, trust is built instantly because employees see their inclusive manager is acting directly, and they're not referring to a slow system. Now, next is A, and that stands for agility. It equals resilience. For example, we want to stick with the same scenario here. Now, let's say in the engineering team, they start to shift team meetings, right? And making sure that there's translations incorporated. They assign a cultural bridge mentor to teach newcomers. They rotate meeting facilitators so that everyone is able to practice inclusion. Now, next is the first S in the PASS formula, and that stands for solution-oriented thinking. So following through with the scenario here, An inclusive leader would encourage members on their team to create their own lightweight systems, right? And so this looks like the team sharing documentation in simple, clear language. This looks like the team outlining communication, right? This looks like the team creating a buddy system that peers and newcomers can actually collaborate together. Now, the last S in the PASS formula is going back to the solution-oriented thinking, right? And that equals progress. Now, following through with our scenario here, an inclusive leader would say, how can we shift our environment so that our new hires from other cultural backgrounds can excel and benefit? See, by applying this PASS formula to the scenario, the outcome should be an inclusive leader who's able to see retention and productivity of immigrant hires spike by 40%. 40%. An inclusive leader should also see teams generating new product ideas that attract more clients to the table. An inclusive leader should see the company earning reputation as a talent magnet, right? In Portugal's tech sector or any sector. So the PASS formula is how companies go from losing talent to actually building cultures and global teams that survive and thrive. So I want to leave you with one final question. How will you apply the PASS formula to your next conversation, to your next decision, or even your next team challenge? I really want you to think about that. Thank you so much for your time today.